In 1964, a man stood in a courtroom in South Africa facing a possible death sentence. His name was Nelson Mandela. He had already been imprisoned, already silenced, already labeled a criminal by the state. He knew he might never see freedom again, and yet, when he spoke, he did not sound defeated. He said calmly, "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Imagine that, a man standing before the possibility of execution. Speaking not from fear, not from anger, but from identity. For 27 years, Mandela lived in a prison cell barely large enough to stretch his arms. What most people don't realize is this: the real battle was not physical, it was internal. Prison can confine the body, but only you can surrender your narrative. Mandela later said that during those long years, he understood something powerful. If he allowed bitterness to define him, he would remain imprisoned even after the door opened. So he chose something radical. He chose authorship. He decided that the system would not define his worth. The sentence would not define his identity. The cage would not define his future. And when he finally walked free, he did not walk out as a victim. He walked out as a leader. Because long before he led a nation, he led himself. He decided who he was, before the world agreed. And that is where all power begins, not in circumstances, not in opportunity, but in declaration. Because every single morning, before the world speaks to you, you speak to yourself. You either inherit a story, or you write one. And that brings us to the first line, the foundation, the anchor, the decision that changes everything. Line 1. I am the sole architect of my fate and the sovereign of my soul. There is a moment each morning before the noise begins, before the world makes its demands, where something subtle but powerful happens. You decide, consciously or unconsciously, who you are going to be that day. Not what will happen to you, but who you will be in response to it. To call yourself the architect of your fate is not an act of arrogance. It is an act of ownership. An architect does not control the weather, the terrain, or the materials placed before him, but he is responsible for the structure that rises from them. He studies limitations. He adapts to constraints. He builds with what exists. Life is no different. You did not choose your starting point. You do not control every opportunity. You cannot prevent every setback, but you always control your response. And your responses, repeated over time, become patterns. Patterns become habits. Habits shape identity, and identity quietly shapes destiny. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That sentence is simple, almost understated, but it contains a radical truth. It shifts the axis of control from the external world to the internal one. It removes excuses, and in doing so, it restores power. When you declare that you are the sole architect of your fate, you are choosing responsibility over resentment. You are choosing agency over blame. Blame feels easier in the moment. It protects the ego. It offers relief. But it also dissolves power. Because the moment you assign control to something outside of you, you surrender the blueprint. And then there is the second half of the line. Sovereign of my soul. A sovereign governs territory, not perfectly, not without resistance, but with authority. Your mind is territory. Your emotions are territory. Your interpretations are territory. If you are not sovereign there, something else will rule. Fear, comparison, insecurity, external validation. Being sovereign does not mean suppressing emotion, it means not being ruled by it. Anger may arise, but it does not command. Doubt may whisper, but it does not decide. Disappointment may visit, but it does not define. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Notice the precision of that statement. He does not promise control over outcomes. He promises control over perception, and perception shapes experience. When you wake up and speak this line, you are not claiming that life will be easy. You are claiming authority over how you will meet it. You are saying that regardless of chaos, uncertainty, or pressure, there is one place where you hold the pen, your inner world. And here is the quiet truth. The external world often mirrors the internal one. When you believe you are powerless, your posture shrinks, your decisions hesitate, your recovery slows. But when you believe you are responsible, something shifts. You move differently, you decide more firmly, you recover more quickly. This declaration is not about ego, it is about discipline. It is about refusing to outsource authorship of your life. Fate is rarely a single dramatic event. It is the accumulation of daily choices. And sovereignty is not a crown you wear once. It is a practice you repeat every morning. Say it slowly. Mean it fully. You are not waiting for rescue. You are not waiting for permission. You are building. And the blueprint begins now. Line 2. My worth is non-negotiable and independent of external validation. There is a quiet trap that almost everyone falls into at some point in life. The belief that our worth is something to be granted by others, that it rises when we are praised and falls when we are criticized, that it depends on applause, recognition, approval, or acceptance. And the danger of that belief is subtle, because if your worth depends on something external, then your stability depends on something you cannot control. You post something and wait for reactions. You complete a project and wait for acknowledgement. You speak and wait for agreement. Without realizing it, you place your internal value into the hands of other people's moods, opinions, and perceptions. But validation is unstable. It fluctuates. It is inconsistent. It is subjective. The Roman philosopher Seneca once wrote, "The approval of the crowd is the test of a life poorly lived." That may sound harsh, but the meaning is deeper than it appears. He was not saying that appreciation is bad. He was warning that when approval becomes the measure of self-worth, freedom disappears. When your worth is negotiable, you begin to negotiate yourself. You adjust your voice to be more acceptable. You soften your opinions to avoid discomfort. You shrink your ambition to avoid intimidation. And slowly, almost invisibly, you trade authenticity for approval. To declare that your worth is non-negotiable is to reclaim internal stability. It is to say that criticism may inform you, but it does not define you. Praise may encourage you, but it does not create you. Your value is not something that rises and falls with outcomes. It is inherent. It exists before achievement. It exists after failure. It exists even in silence. There is a difference between performance and identity. Performance can vary. You can succeed today and fail tomorrow. You can be confident in one area and inexperienced in another. But identity, your inherent human worth, is not tied to performance metrics. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus taught that if you want to be free, you must not seek to control what others think of you. Because the moment you anchor your self-worth in external opinion, you become dependent on something unstable. This does not mean you ignore feedback. It means you separate feedback from identity. You can improve without condemning yourself. You can adjust without devaluing yourself. Think about how much energy people waste trying to appear worthy rather than simply acting from worth. When you believe your value is dependent on validation, you hesitate, you overthink, you second-guess, you fear rejection as if it were annihilation. But when your worth is non-negotiable, something changes. You act more cleanly, you speak more directly, you recover more quickly from criticism because your foundation is not shaking. This declaration is not about arrogance. It is about grounding. It is about understanding that you do not have to earn the right to exist confidently. External validation is pleasant. It feels good. But it is not oxygen. You do not need it to survive. And here is the paradox. The less you depend on validation, the more authentic your actions become. And authenticity often earns the very respect that chasing approval never could. When you wake up and speak this line, you are reminding yourself that your value does not fluctuate with algorithms, opinions, or temporary outcomes. You are not negotiating your identity with the world. You are standing in it. Line 3. I am enough exactly as I am, yet I strive for greatness every day. There is a tension that many people struggle to reconcile. On one side, the desire to improve. On the other, the quiet feeling that who they are right now is somehow insufficient. They believe growth requires dissatisfaction. That ambition must be fueled by self-criticism. That in order to become better, they must first convince themselves they are not enough. But this is a misunderstanding. Growth does not require self-rejection. Discipline does not require self-hatred. Ambition does not require shame. To say, I am enough exactly as I am, is not to deny your potential. It is to separate your worth from your performance. It is to recognize that your value as a human being is complete, even while your skills, habits, and character continue to evolve. Carl Rogers, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, once wrote, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." That statement holds profound wisdom. Real growth begins not from condemnation, but from acceptance. When you stop fighting your own existence, your energy becomes available for transformation. If you believe you are fundamentally flawed, every failure feels like confirmation. Every setback reinforces an old narrative. But if you understand that you are already enough, that your worth is not under review, then improvement becomes exploration, not desperation. And yet, the second half of this declaration matters just as much. Yet I strive for greatness every day. Acceptance is not complacency. There is a danger in misinterpreting self-acceptance as passivity. Being enough does not mean staying the same. It means you improve from stability, not insecurity. You pursue greatness not to prove your value, but to express it. The Stoics believed deeply in self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to rise above mediocrity, to refine his character, to act with virtue. But he did not do this because he believed he was worthless. He did it because he believed he had a responsibility to cultivate his potential. There is a difference between improving because you feel inadequate and improving because you respect yourself. When improvement is driven by inadequacy, it becomes frantic. You compare yourself constantly. You measure your progress against others. You feel behind. You rush. But when improvement is driven by self-respect, it becomes steady, deliberate, sustainable. You wake up and you ask, not, how do I become worthy today, but How do I express my potential more fully today? This line invites balance. It reminds you that you are not a project to be fixed. You are a person to be developed. You are enough, even in your imperfection. Enough, even while learning. Enough, even while building. And at the same time, you refuse stagnation. You reject comfort as a destination. You understand that greatness is not a title, but a practice. The beauty of this declaration is that it removes internal conflict. You do not have to choose between peace and ambition. You can hold both. You can accept yourself fully and still challenge yourself daily. When you speak this line in the morning, you are grounding yourself before you push yourself. You are standing on solid internal ground before climbing higher. You are not running from who you are. You are building on it. Line 4. Every breath I take is a commitment to my highest evolution. There is something quietly profound about the act of breathing. It is automatic, constant, unnoticed. We do it thousands of times a day without thought. And yet, it is the most fundamental sign that we are alive. Every breath is continuation. Every breath is permission to begin again. Most people move through their days mechanically. They react, they rush, they postpone, they delay their growth for some imagined future moment when conditions will be ideal. They say, "One day I'll change. One day I'll become disciplined. One day I'll start." But life does not unfold in one days. It unfolds in breaths. To say that every breath is a commitment to your highest evolution is to collapse the distance between who you are and who you are becoming. It means growth is not reserved for dramatic turning points. It is embedded in ordinary moments. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man." Change is constant. Whether you choose it or not, you are evolving. The question is not whether you are changing. The question is whether you are changing deliberately. Every breath is a unit of time, a small, silent measure of existence. And within each one, there is a choice: drift unconsciously or move intentionally. Your highest evolution does not mean perfection. It does not mean becoming someone else. It means refining who you already are, sharpening your discipline, deepening your awareness, expanding your courage. Most transformation is subtle. It is not visible in a single day, but it compounds, just as neglect compounds, just as distraction compounds. Think about how often people postpone growth because it feels overwhelming. They imagine evolution as a massive leap, a total reinvention. But evolution is granular. It is choosing patience instead of irritation in one moment, focus instead of distraction in the next, integrity instead of convenience. One breath, one decision. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." That reflection was not meant to provoke fear. It was meant to sharpen awareness, to remind him that time is not abstract. It is immediate. It is finite. When you recognize that every breath is a gift, urgency becomes clarity, not panic. You stop wasting mental energy on trivial conflicts. You stop postponing difficult actions. You understand that evolution is not something you schedule for later. It is something you practice now. This declaration shifts your relationship with time. It moves you from passive existence to conscious participation. It asks you to treat each inhale as responsibility and each exhale as release. You inhale strength. You exhale hesitation. You inhale focus. You exhale distraction. Growth becomes rhythmic, steady, sustainable. Your highest evolution is not a distant peak. It is a direction, and every breath either moves you toward it or away from it. When you wake up and speak this line, you are reminding yourself that today is not separate from your future. This moment is not disconnected from your destiny. There is no waiting period for becoming better. You are evolving right now, and the commitment begins with the very next breath. Line 5. I am the creator of my future, not a victim of my past. There is a quiet weight that many people carry without realizing it, the weight of their own history, past mistakes, lost opportunities, failures, regrets, words said, words unsaid. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the past becomes a lens through which the future is viewed. I failed before, so I will probably fail again. I've always struggled with this, so this is just who I am. This is how my life has been, so this is how it will continue. The past becomes prophecy, but the Stoics would gently challenge this idea. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Notice the shift in perspective. The obstacle is not a permanent scar. It is material. It is training. It is fuel. To declare that you are the creator of your future is to refuse the passive identity of victim. It does not deny that the past happened. It does not pretend that pain was not real. It simply refuses to let yesterday dictate tomorrow. There is a difference between learning from the past and living inside it. When you live inside it, you replay it. You relive it. You attach identity to it. You say, "This happened to me," and eventually, "This is me." But events are not identity. Experiences are not destiny. The human brain is wired to reinforce familiar patterns. It prefers predictability. If you have failed repeatedly, your mind will anticipate failure as protection. If you have been rejected, it will expect rejection. This is not weakness. It is survival programming. But survival is not growth. To create your future, you must interrupt automatic prediction. You must consciously decide that what happened does not own what will happen. Epictetus taught that while we cannot control external events, we can control how we interpret them. Interpretation shapes action. Action shapes results. Results shape trajectory. If you interpret your past as evidence of limitation, your actions will shrink. If you interpret it as evidence of resilience, your actions will expand. The difference lies not in the event, but in the meaning you assign to it. There is also a quiet empowerment in recognizing that the future is not built in dramatic breakthroughs. It is built in daily decisions, small acts of courage, small acts of discipline, small acts of self-respect. Your past may explain you, but it does not define you. Think of someone who has trained for years in a craft, music, athletics, science. Their early failures did not disappear. They became foundation. They became data. They became refinement. The past is raw material. But raw material does not build itself. It requires intention. When you speak this line in the morning, you are not erasing your history. You are reclaiming authorship over its meaning. You are saying, "What happened shaped me, but it does not confine me." Victimhood feels stable because it removes responsibility. If the past controls the future, then effort seems pointless. But if you are the creator of your future, effort becomes powerful. Creation implies design. It implies adjustment. It implies persistence. The future is not something you walk into blindly. It is something you construct through repeated choices, through how you respond to setbacks today, through whether you act despite doubt, through whether you learn or resent. Your history may be heavy, but it is not a prison unless you decide to live inside it. The moment you decide that the past is reference, not residence, something shifts. Energy returns. Possibility expands. You are not what happened. You are what you choose next. And that choice is available now. Line 6. My mind is a fortress. I only permit thoughts that empower my purpose. There is a space inside you that no one can enter without permission. Not physically, not legally, but psychologically. And yet, most people leave the gates open. A single comment from someone else lingers for hours. A comparison on social media plants doubt. A memory resurfaces and reshapes the entire mood of the day. Thoughts come and go, but not all of them deserve residency. Some are visitors, some are intruders. To say that your mind is a fortress is to recognize that not every thought is truth, and not every internal voice deserves authority. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." He did not say the quantity, he did not say the intensity, he said the quality. That implies selection, discernment, gatekeeping. A fortress is not built to isolate, it is built to protect what matters. Inside your mind lives your focus, your ambition, your values, your sense of direction. If you allow every doubt, every external opinion, every irrational fear to wander freely, the structure weakens. Most negative thoughts are automatic. They arise from conditioning, past experience, biological wiring. They are not moral failures. They are reflexes. But reflexes do not have to become rulers. The Stoics understood that between stimulus and response lies interpretation, and interpretation is a choice. When a challenge appears, one thought says, "This is too much." Another says, "This is training." When criticism comes, one thought says, "You're not good enough." Another says, "This is feedback." The event is neutral. The thought assigns meaning. A fortress does not eliminate storms, it withstands them. To guard your mind does not mean suppressing doubt. It means examining it, asking, "Is this thought useful? Is it aligned with my purpose? Does it strengthen or weaken me?" Epictetus taught that we should not believe everything we think. He encouraged people to pause before accepting impressions as reality. That pause is power. In that pause, you decide whether a thought becomes belief or passes through. Purpose requires energy, and energy leaks through unexamined thinking. If you constantly entertain thoughts of inadequacy, your focus fragments. If you rehearse imagined failure, your confidence erodes before action begins. If you replay past mistakes without extracting lessons, you drain momentum. But when you consciously permit only thoughts that empower your purpose, something shifts. Not magically, not instantly, but steadily. Empowering thoughts are not delusional. They are constructive. They acknowledge difficulty without surrendering strength. They recognize fear without obeying it. This is mental discipline, quiet, invisible, repeated daily. You do not control which thoughts appear first, but you control which ones you feed. Attention is nourishment. What you dwell on grows. When you wake up and speak this line, you are setting a boundary. You are saying, "My mind is not a public space. It is intentional territory. Doubt may knock. Distraction may whisper. Negativity may appear. But they do not command. Because a fortress is not defined by the absence of attack. It is defined by the strength of its walls. And those walls are built one thought at a time." Line 7. I command my focus. Where my attention goes, my power flows. Attention is the most underestimated force in your life. It feels light, invisible, but it is the currency of your reality. Wherever you place it, you give energy, and whatever receives energy grows. Most people do not command their focus. They lend it. They scatter it. They surrender it. A notification pulls them. A headline disturbs them. A comment distracts them. By the end of the day, they feel exhausted, not because they worked deeply, but because their attention was fragmented. William James once wrote, "My experience is what I agree to attend to." That sentence is deceptively simple. Your experience, not objective reality, is shaped by what you choose to focus on. Two people can live the same day and experience entirely different emotional landscapes based on what they attend to. If you focus on obstacles, you will feel blocked. If you focus on progress, you will feel momentum. If you focus on criticism, you will feel inadequate. If you focus on opportunity, you will feel possibility. The external world is vast. Infinite stimuli compete for your awareness. But your attention is finite, and because it is finite, it is powerful. To command your focus is to reclaim authorship over your mental environment. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to return to what was essential. He wrote about ignoring trivialities, refusing to be disturbed by minor irritations, and narrowing his attention to what was within his control. Not because distractions didn't exist, but because he understood that where attention flows, emotional energy follows. When your attention is uncontrolled, your power leaks. Think about how often people replay small frustrations. A brief disagreement becomes a mental loop that lasts hours. A minor mistake becomes a narrative repeated internally all day. Attention feeds it. Energy strengthens it. Now imagine redirecting that same attention toward what matters, toward your work, toward your growth, toward a single meaningful task executed with depth. Focus compounds, distraction fragments. There is also something deeper at play. Attention shapes identity. If you constantly attend to what others are doing, you begin to define yourself by comparison. If you attend to your own path, you begin to define yourself by progress. The philosopher Simone Weil once said, "Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. When you give something your full attention, you dignify it. That includes your goals, your discipline, your craft. But attention must be intentional. To command your focus means you do not drift. You choose. You decide what deserves your mental energy and what does not. You understand that saying yes to one thing requires saying no to another. This is not rigidity. It is clarity. When you wake up and speak this line, you are reminding yourself that attention is not passive. It is directional. And direction determines outcome. Where your attention goes, your power flows. If it flows toward resentment, resentment strengthens. If it flows toward growth, growth strengthens. If it flows toward fear, fear expands. If it flows toward action, action multiplies. Every day you are either investing your focus or spending it. And the difference between the two is intention. Command it. Because in a distracted world, disciplined attention is a superpower. Line 8. I do not react to chaos. I respond with calculated poise. Chaos is inevitable. It appears in conversations, in deadlines, in unexpected news, in misunderstandings, in the small fractures of daily life. And most people meet chaos with chaos. A raised voice meets another raised voice. A sudden problem triggers immediate panic. An inconvenience spirals into emotional turbulence. Reaction is instinctive. It is fast, automatic, emotional. Response is different. It is deliberate, measured, intentional. The Stoics built much of their philosophy around this distinction. Epictetus taught that between what happens and how we respond lies a space, and in that space lives our freedom. While the exact phrasing is often attributed later to Viktor Frankl, the Stoic foundation is clear. Events are external, responses are internal, and the internal is where power resides. To react is to surrender control. To respond is to exercise it. When something unexpected happens, the body reacts before the mind does. The heart rate increases, muscles tighten, thoughts accelerate. This is biological. It is ancient. It is not weakness. But the mistake is believing that the first impulse must become the final action. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about maintaining composure amid pressure. Not because he lived in calm conditions, he governed during war, plague, and political tension, but because he understood that external disorder does not require internal disorder. Calculated poise is not coldness, it is clarity under pressure. When chaos appears, there is a temptation to match its intensity, to move faster, to speak louder, to decide impulsively, but composure creates advantage. It slows perception just enough to see clearly. It allows discernment instead of defensiveness. Seneca warned against anger precisely because it overrides reason. Anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. Reaction feels powerful in the moment, but it often leaves damage behind in relationships, in reputation, in self-respect. Calculated poise means you pause before speaking. You breathe before responding. You observe before concluding. It does not mean you avoid confrontation. It means you choose your posture within it. In modern life, chaos is amplified. Constant notifications, urgent emails, breaking news, social media outrage. The environment is engineered to provoke reaction. Quick comments, instant judgment, immediate response. But speed is not strength. The person who remains steady while others escalate holds quiet influence. Calm becomes leverage. Stability becomes authority. When you wake up and speak this line, you are preparing in advance. You are acknowledging that chaos will likely appear today, in some form, large or small, and you are deciding now how you will meet it. Not with denial, not with panic, not with emotional reflex, but with awareness. There is something powerful about knowing that your state is not determined by the volume of the external world. You do not have to mirror the intensity around you. You can lower it. You can contain it. You can redirect it. Calculated poise is a discipline. It is trained in small moments, in traffic, in disagreement, in delay, so that when larger storms come, the habit of steadiness is already built. Chaos tests you, reaction weakens you, response refines you, and refinement, repeated daily, becomes character. Line 9. I am the master of my emotions, never their slave. Emotions are powerful. They arise quickly, often without warning, and they feel convincing. Anger feels justified. Fear feels protective. Sadness feels permanent. And in the intensity of the moment, it is easy to believe that what we feel must dictate what we do. But there is a difference between experiencing an emotion and being ruled by it. To be the master of your emotions does not mean you eliminate them. It does not mean you suppress anger, silence grief, or deny anxiety. The Stoics never argued for emotional numbness. What they argued for was governance. Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." Emotions often amplify beyond the event that triggered them. A small criticism becomes a deep wound. A minor uncertainty becomes overwhelming anxiety. The emotion grows, not because the event grows, but because attention feeds it. Slavery to emotion happens when impulse becomes command. Someone speaks harshly, and you immediately respond with equal harshness. A setback appears, and you instantly assume failure. A moment of doubt arises, and you retreat before attempting. In these moments, emotion dictates direction. Mastery begins with awareness. When you feel anger, you pause and notice it. When fear arises, you examine it. When disappointment appears, you observe it before attaching meaning. That small pause, that gap between feeling and action, is where sovereignty lives. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that emotions are interpretations layered upon events. If the interpretation changes, the emotional intensity often changes with it. This does not mean emotions are fake. It means they are influenced by thought. Imagine someone criticizing your work. One interpretation says, "This proves I'm inadequate." Another says, "This is an opportunity to improve." The external event is identical. The internal experience shifts dramatically. Being master of your emotions means you recognize that while you cannot always control the first emotional surge, you can control the narrative that follows. Fear can be data. Anger can be signal. Sadness can be information. But none of them have to be orders. The philosopher Aristotle described virtue as finding the mean between extremes, courage between recklessness and cowardice, calm between apathy and rage. Emotional mastery is not about suppression, it is about calibration. In modern life, emotional stimulation is constant. News cycles provoke outrage, social media triggers comparison, work pressures create stress. If you allow every emotional impulse to dictate your direction, your day becomes reactive and fragmented. But when you decide in advance that emotions are experiences, not identities, something stabilizes. You feel deeply, but you do not collapse. You respond firmly, but not explosively. You acknowledge pain, but you do not define yourself by it. When you wake up and speak this line, you are not promising to feel nothing. You are promising to feel consciously, to let emotion inform you, not command you. Because mastery is quiet. It does not eliminate storms. It steadies the ship. And the more you practice this discipline in small moments, the stronger it becomes in larger ones. You are not your anger. You are not your fear. You are not your temporary state. You are the one observing it. And that observer, calm, aware, deliberate, holds the reins. Line 10. I define my boundaries, and I protect my energy with an iron will. There comes a point in life when you realize that exhaustion is not always the result of hard work. Sometimes it is the result of weak boundaries, of saying yes when you meant no, of allowing access where there should have been limits, of giving time, attention, and emotional bandwidth to things that do not align with your direction. Energy is finite, not just physical energy, but mental and emotional energy, and yet many people spend it carelessly. They engage in arguments that lead nowhere. They entertain distractions that dilute their focus. They tolerate dynamics that quietly drain them. To define your boundaries is not to build walls against the world. It is to draw lines around what matters. The Stoics understood the importance of internal discipline. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself not to be carried away by impressions. That phrase carries weight. To be carried away is to lose center. Boundaries prevent that drift. When you lack boundaries, you become reactive. Other people's moods influence yours. Other people's urgency becomes your pressure. Other people's expectations shape your schedule, and slowly you find yourself living a life designed by external demands rather than internal priorities. But when you define your boundaries clearly, something stabilizes. You choose when to engage. You choose what deserves your attention. You choose how much access others have to your time and emotional space. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But the reverse is also true. If your why is unclear, your energy will be scattered across countless hows. Boundaries protect the why. Protecting your energy with an iron will does not mean becoming rigid or unkind. It means being deliberate. It means recognizing that every commitment carries cost. Every conversation consumes attention. Every distraction fragments momentum. And not everything deserves equal access to you. There is a quiet strength in saying no without apology, in stepping back from unnecessary conflict, in declining opportunities that do not align with your values. Weak boundaries lead to resentment. Strong boundaries lead to clarity. Resentment often grows not because others overstep, but because we fail to communicate limits. We silently agree, then internally protest. We comply externally, then feel drained internally. Iron will is not aggression, it is consistency. It is waking up and deciding that your focus, your time, your mental space are assets, not public utilities. In a world that constantly competes for your attention, boundaries are acts of self-respect. They signal to yourself that your direction matters, that your peace matters, that your growth matters. When you speak this line in the morning, you are preparing for moments of pressure, for invitations that distract, for requests that overextend, for environments that challenge your center. You are reminding yourself that energy invested wisely multiplies, energy scattered diminishes. You do not have unlimited time. You do not have unlimited focus. You do not have unlimited emotional bandwidth, and that is precisely why it must be guarded. A boundary is not a rejection of others. It is a commitment to your purpose, and purpose requires protection. Line 11. Focus is my greatest currency. I refuse to waste it on trivia. There is a reason the most successful people in any field guard their attention fiercely. Not because they're antisocial, not because they lack curiosity, but because they understand something most people overlook. Focus is currency. And unlike money, once attention is spent, it cannot be recovered. In a distracted world, attention is constantly under attack. Notifications, headlines, endless scrolling, minor dramas, arguments that lead nowhere. Each one seems small, harmless, but collectively they fragment your mind. Fragmentation weakens momentum. William James once observed, "The art of being wise is the art of knowing what to overlook." That sentence captures something profound. Wisdom is not only about what you study, it is about what you ignore. When you treat focus as currency, you become selective. You ask yourself, is this worthy of my mental energy? Does this align with my direction? Or is this simply noise disguised as urgency? Trivialities are seductive because they are easy. It is easier to argue online than to refine your craft. Easier to scroll than to think deeply. Easier to consume than to create. But depth requires sustained attention, and sustained attention requires discipline. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about returning to what is essential, not reacting to gossip, not engaging in petty conflict, not allowing minor irritations to dominate his mental landscape. As an emperor surrounded by political tension, he understood that not everything deserved his focus. The modern world thrives on urgency. Everything appears immediate, breaking, important, but urgency does not equal importance. There is a difference between what is loud and what is meaningful. If you spend your attention on trivial matters, you will feel busy, but not productive, stimulated, but not fulfilled. The philosopher Blaise Pascal once said, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Focus requires that ability, the capacity to remain with a single thought, a single task, long enough for depth to form. Trivial distractions fracture that depth before it can mature. When you refuse to waste your focus, you begin to notice how often it is requested, how often minor events attempt to dominate your internal space, how easily comparison steals your energy, how quickly outrage spreads, and you begin to decline. Not everything deserves a response. Not everything deserves analysis. Not everything deserves your emotional bandwidth. Focus compounds. A single hour of uninterrupted work often produces more than 5 hours of distracted effort. A single deep conversation often matters more than dozens of shallow exchanges. When you wake up and speak this line, you are making a quiet commitment. You are saying that your attention is not free, that it is reserved for what builds, what matters, what aligns with your purpose. Because where attention goes, results follow. If you invest your focus in growth, growth multiplies. If you invest it in distraction, distraction expands. The choice is constant. Focus is not about doing more things. It is about doing fewer things with greater intensity. And in a world that monetizes distraction, disciplined attention is rare. Treat it as wealth. Guard it. Spend it intentionally. Line 12. Action is the ultimate antidote to fear. I move toward what intimidates me. Fear has a unique quality. It grows in stillness. It expands in hesitation. The longer you wait, the larger it becomes. The conversation you postpone becomes heavier. The project you delay becomes more intimidating. The step you avoid begins to look impossible. But something interesting happens the moment you act. Fear shrinks, not because the situation disappears, but because movement disrupts imagination. Much of fear is projection, scenarios constructed in the mind, outcomes exaggerated, consequences amplified beyond proportion. Seneca observed, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." That insight cuts directly to the heart of fear. The anticipation of discomfort is often worse than the discomfort itself. The mind rehearses failure repeatedly, strengthening anxiety before reality has even had a chance to respond. Action interrupts that rehearsal. When you take a step forward, however small, the narrative shifts. You gather data, you replace speculation with experience. Even if the outcome is imperfect, you are no longer trapped in the paralysis of uncertainty. Most people wait to feel ready before acting, but readiness rarely arrives in advance. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is movement despite it. Aristotle described courage as the mean between recklessness and cowardice. It is not blind impulsivity, it is measured advance in the presence of risk. When you move toward what intimidates you, you are not denying fear. You are redefining your relationship with it. Fear often signals growth. The edge of discomfort frequently marks the boundary of expansion. If something challenges you, stretches you, unsettles you slightly, it may be pointing toward development. Avoidance feels safe in the short term, but long term it compounds regret. The unspoken words accumulate, the untaken risks linger, the unused potential becomes a quiet weight. Action, even imperfect action, builds momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence reduces fear. This is a cycle, and you decide which direction it turns. Think about a moment in your life when you delayed something out of anxiety. The first email, the first public attempt, the first difficult conversation. Notice how the mind inflated the stakes. Then remember the moment you finally acted. Rarely was reality as catastrophic as imagination predicted. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself not to be disturbed by things that have not yet happened. He practiced grounding himself in the present action, not the imagined future outcome. Action anchors you in now. When you wake up and speak this line, you are preparing for moments of hesitation. You are acknowledging that fear will likely appear today, in a decision, a conversation, a challenge. And you are deciding in advance that movement will be your response. Not reckless movement, not impulsive reaction, but deliberate forward motion. Fear thrives in delay. It weakens in engagement. Each time you move toward what intimidates you, you expand your capacity. The next challenge feels slightly smaller. The next risk feels slightly more manageable. Your identity shifts from someone who avoids to someone who advances. You do not eliminate fear by waiting for it to disappear. You diminish it by walking through it, and each step forward becomes evidence. Not that you are fearless, but that you are stronger than what once intimidated you. Line 13. I embrace the weight of discipline today to avoid the sting of regret tomorrow. There is a quiet trade that happens every single day. Comfort now, or pride later. Ease now, or strength later. Distraction now, or progress later. Most people do not consciously choose comfort. They drift into it. They postpone the difficult workout, delay the uncomfortable conversation, push the important task to tomorrow. And in the moment, the relief feels justified, small, harmless. But time keeps moving, and tomorrow has a way of collecting unpaid discipline. Regret is rarely loud at first. It begins subtly, as a quiet awareness that you could have done more, that you knew better, that the opportunity was there, and you chose ease instead. The Stoics understood this tension deeply. Epictetus reminded his students that freedom requires training, that character is not built in moments of convenience, but in moments of resistance. Discipline is not punishment, it is preparation. There is a difference between suffering with purpose and suffering without it. When you choose discipline, you accept temporary discomfort for long-term strength. When you avoid it, you often experience a different kind of discomfort later, the discomfort of lost potential. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Discipline is one of the clearest expressions of that power. It is saying no to impulse in service of intention. It is aligning behavior with values, even when emotion suggests otherwise. The weight of discipline can feel heavy in the moment. Waking up early when you want to stay in bed. Staying focused when distraction is easier. Choosing restraint when indulgence is tempting. But that weight strengthens you. Just as resistance builds muscle, restraint builds character. And here is the subtle truth. The pain of discipline is usually sharp but brief. The pain of regret is quiet but persistent. Think about a time when you committed to something difficult, training, studying, improving a skill. The days were not always comfortable, but the pride that followed was steady, grounded, lasting. Now think about a time you avoided what you knew you should do. The relief was immediate, but the awareness lingered. Seneca wrote, "While we wait for life, life passes. Discipline is the refusal to wait passively. It is the decision to engage fully now, rather than hoping the future compensates for present neglect. When you wake up and speak this line, you are not glorifying suffering. You are choosing alignment. You are reminding yourself that the version of you want to become requires consistent investment. Greatness is rarely dramatic. It is repetitive. It is built in mornings when no one is watching, in habits repeated without applause, in commitments honored quietly. Discipline today is self-respect tomorrow. Every time you choose the harder right over the easier wrong, you reinforce identity. You become someone who follows through, someone who does not negotiate with impulse. And over time, that identity becomes unshakable. Comfort fades quickly, regret lingers, discipline transforms, and the weight you carry today becomes the strength you rely on tomorrow. Line 14. Small, relentless wins are the foundation of my inevitable success. There is a misconception about success that quietly misguides many people. They imagine it as a breakthrough, a dramatic leap, a defining moment where everything changes at once. But in reality, success rarely arrives as a single explosion. It accumulates. It is built in increments so small they almost feel insignificant. A single, focused hour. A single, disciplined choice. A single promise kept to yourself. Alone, each action seems minor. Together, repeated relentlessly, they become unstoppable. The Roman philosopher Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." The waste rarely comes from catastrophic mistakes. It comes from small neglects repeated daily. In the same way, greatness is not built from one extraordinary act, but from ordinary actions repeated with consistency. The key word in this declaration is relentless. Anyone can win once. Motivation can produce a strong day. Inspiration can carry you through a powerful week. But inevitability is built through repetition, especially when no one is watching, when results are not yet visible, when progress feels slow. Think about physical training. One workout changes nothing, but months of consistent effort transform the body. The same is true for the mind, for discipline, for craft. Marcus Aurelius understood the power of daily refinement. His journal was not a collection of grand philosophies written once. It was a daily practice of recalibration, small corrections, small reminders, small commitments renewed. Small wins compound. Every time you complete a task you said you would complete, you reinforce identity. Every time you show up despite not feeling like it, you strengthen reliability. These are not dramatic victories, but they are structural ones. Most people underestimate the power of accumulation because it lacks spectacle. Social media celebrates outcomes, the finished product, the public achievement. It rarely shows the quiet repetition that made it possible. But repetition is the architecture of inevitability. The philosopher Aristotle spoke of excellence as a habit. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Habits are nothing more than small actions, repeated long enough to become automatic. The problem is that people abandon small wins because they do not feel impressive. They chase bigger gestures, larger risks, faster results, and when those fail, discouragement follows. But small wins are controllable. You can control whether you wake up on time. You can control whether you complete your priority task. You can control whether you keep your word today. Each one builds credibility with yourself, and self-trust is momentum. When you trust yourself to follow through, hesitation decreases. confidence increases, action becomes smoother. This is how inevitability forms, not through luck, but through consistent execution. When you wake up and speak this line, you are shifting your focus from dramatic achievement to disciplined accumulation. You are reminding yourself that today does not need to be extraordinary. It needs to be intentional. One focused session, one disciplined choice, one commitment honored. That is enough, because when small wins are relentless, success is not a surprise. It is the only possible outcome. Line 15. I am a person of my word. My execution is my reputation. Marcus Aurelius wrote a line that has echoed across centuries. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. That idea is not poetic optimism. It is strategic reframing. An obstacle reveals weakness in structure. It exposes where preparation is insufficient. It forces adaptation, and adaptation builds strength. Most people resist resistance. They treat difficulty as injustice. They ask, "Why is this happening to me?" But resistance is often the very mechanism that refines you. Consider physical training. Muscle grows not in comfort, but in resistance. The strain creates micro-tears. The recovery rebuilds stronger tissue. Without resistance, there is no growth. The same applies psychologically. When something blocks your path, it tests your flexibility. Can you adjust? Can you innovate? Can you persist without collapsing into frustration? Fuel is not always pleasant. It burns. Criticism can sting, but it can sharpen awareness. Failure can frustrate, but it can reveal blind spots. Delay can irritate, but it can force patience and strategy. If you interpret every obstacle as opposition, you weaken. If you interpret it as training, you strengthen. The Stoics did not ask for easy lives. They prepared for difficult ones. Epictetus taught that hardship is not personal persecution, but part of the structure of reality. The question is not whether obstacles will appear. They will. The question is how you metabolize them. When you encounter resistance and continue forward, something shifts internally. You stop expecting smooth paths. You begin expecting friction, and because you expect it, you are not destabilized by it. There is also something empowering about refusing to give obstacles emotional authority. You acknowledge them, you assess them, you adapt to them, but you do not dramatize them. Dramatization drains energy. Strategy redirects it. When you wake up and speak this line, you are preparing yourself psychologically. You are not assuming that the day will unfold perfectly. You are assuming that resistance may appear, and that when it does, it becomes material. Material for growth, material for refinement, material for strength. An obstacle can either become a wall or a weight you lift. And every time you lift it, you become more capable of carrying the next one. You are not moving toward a frictionless life. You are building the capacity to move through friction without breaking. What stands in your way does not define you. What you do with it does. And when you choose to use resistance as fuel, you convert opposition into momentum. Line 17. I am like gold. The fires of life purify me rather than consume me. There is something revealing about fire. It does not create weakness. It exposes it. When gold is placed in fire, it does not disintegrate. It is refined. Impurities rise to the surface. What remains becomes stronger, clearer, more valuable. Life has its own fires: pressure, loss, failure, criticism, unexpected change, moments when certainty collapses and comfort disappears. In those moments, it can feel as though you are being consumed, as though circumstances are eroding you. But adversity does not automatically destroy, it reveals. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "That which does not kill us makes us stronger." The statement is often repeated casually, but its depth lies in interpretation. Hardship does not strengthen you by default. It strengthens you if you engage with it consciously, if you allow it to refine rather than embitter. Two people can experience the same setback. One becomes resentful, the other becomes disciplined. One withdraws, the other recalibrates. The fire is the same. The outcome depends on posture. When you see yourself as fragile, pressure feels threatening. When you see yourself as material capable of refinement, pressure becomes transformative. Marcus Aurelius governed during plague and war, yet in his reflections he did not ask for escape from difficulty. He asked for the strength to meet it with clarity. He understood that comfort rarely develops resilience. Resistance does. Fire removes illusion. It exposes impatience. It reveals where ego is attached. It shows where discipline is thin. And that exposure is not punishment. It is information. Think about a time when you faced something deeply uncomfortable. Perhaps you did not feel prepared. Perhaps you felt overwhelmed. But afterward, something shifted. You saw yourself differently. You trusted yourself more. Not because the experience was pleasant, but because you endured it. That is refinement. To say you are like gold is not to claim invulnerability. It is to claim resilience. It is to acknowledge that hardship may be intense, but it is temporary. That what feels like destruction may actually be purification. Epictetus, who lived as a slave before becoming a philosopher, embodied this principle. His external circumstances were harsh, but internally he chose not to be broken by them. He used them to sharpen discipline and perspective. The key is interpretation. If you interpret hardship as evidence that life is unfair, bitterness grows. If you interpret it as training, endurance grows. Fire will come regardless. The question is whether it leaves you scarred by resentment or strengthened by reflection. When you wake up and speak this line, you are reframing future challenges in advance. You are deciding that whatever pressure arrives, it will not define you negatively. It will clarify you, refine you. You do not seek fire, but you do not fear it, because you understand that what is false burns away. What is weak strengthens through resistance, and what is essential remains. The heat of life does not exist to consume you. It exists to reveal who you are becoming, and if you remain steady within it, you do not emerge diminished. You emerge purified. Line 18. My resilience is a muscle that grows stronger with every challenge. Resilience is often misunderstood as a trait you either have or you don't, as if some people are simply built tougher, born unshakable, while others are fragile by nature. But resilience is not inherited like eye color. It is trained like strength. A muscle does not grow in comfort. It grows under tension. The first time you face difficulty, it feels overwhelming. The second time, slightly more manageable. Not because the challenge changed, but because you did. Each encounter with adversity leaves a subtle imprint. If you face it consciously, you expand. Psychologist Angela Duckworth, known for her work on grit, describes perseverance as sustained effort over time, despite setbacks. That despite is everything. Resilience is not about avoiding failure. It is about continuing after it. The Stoics practiced resilience deliberately. They mentally rehearsed hardship. They reflected on impermanence. They trained their minds to expect resistance so that when it arrived, it did not shock them. Marcus Aurelius did not assume life would be smooth. He prepared for difficulty in advance, not pessimistically, strategically. He understood that resilience is built through repeated exposure to challenge, not by hiding from it. Every challenge carries two opportunities. One is to retreat and reinforce avoidance. The other is to engage and strengthen endurance. The first builds fragility. The second builds resilience. Think about how physical training works. If you lift a weight that is slightly beyond your comfort zone, the body adapts. It repairs stronger. But if you avoid strain entirely, strength diminishes. The same applies mentally and emotionally. Each time you navigate disappointment without collapsing, you strengthen. Each time you experience rejection and continue, you reinforce stability. Each time you endure uncertainty without panic, you expand capacity. Resilience grows quietly. It does not announce itself dramatically. It accumulates through repetition, through choosing not to quit when quitting feels easier, through standing steady when emotions surge, through adjusting when plans fail. The philosopher Seneca once said, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." Notice the simplicity of that comparison. Labor strains the body so that it can rebuild stronger. Difficulty strains the mind so that it can develop depth. Without difficulty, there is no test. Without test, there is no strengthening. Modern culture often seeks convenience, speed, immediate results. But resilience requires patience. It requires allowing discomfort to exist long enough for adaptation to occur. When you wake up and speak this line, you are reframing hardship before it even arrives. You are telling yourself that when today presents something difficult, and it likely will, it is not interruption, it is training. You are not shrinking, you are expanding. Each challenge becomes repetition. Each repetition builds strength, and over time, what once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once felt intimidating becomes routine. What once triggered fear now triggers focus. Resilience is not loud, it is steady. It is built in the quiet decision not to fold, in the deliberate choice to continue. Your capacity is not fixed, it grows, and every challenge is a repetition in the gym of character. Line 19. I accept reality as it is, then I work to shape it to my will. There is a subtle but powerful difference between denial and acceptance. Denial resists what is, acceptance acknowledges it, and without acceptance there can be no intelligent action. Many people waste enormous energy arguing with reality. They replay what should not have happened. They resist what cannot be undone. They cling to versions of events that no longer exist. But reality does not negotiate. It simply is. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus taught that some things are within our control and some are not. Clarity begins with distinguishing between the two. If you fight what you cannot control, frustration multiplies. If you ignore what you can control, opportunity disappears. Acceptance is not surrender, it is alignment. When you accept reality as it is, you see clearly. You remove illusion. You stop pretending circumstances are different than they are. And that clarity gives you leverage. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." That sentence contains both humility and strength. Humility because it recognizes limits. Strength because it directs focus inward where influence exists. If the situation is difficult, acknowledge it. If you made a mistake, own it. If conditions are unfavorable, see them clearly. Acceptance does not weaken you, it stabilizes you. Once reality is seen without distortion, strategy becomes possible. Shaping reality to your will does not mean forcing the world to obey you. It means responding intelligently, adjusting, acting deliberately within constraints. Consider a sailor at sea. He does not control the wind. Denying the wind would be foolish. Complaining about it changes nothing. But by understanding it, by adjusting the sails, he moves forward anyway. Reality is the wind. Your response is the sail. Many people confuse acceptance with passivity. They believe that if they accept something, they must approve of it. But you can accept that something exists without agreeing with it. Acceptance simply means you are no longer wasting energy pretending it is different. Seneca warned that suffering increases when we resist the inevitable, but he also emphasized action where action is possible. The balance lies in recognizing what must be endured and what can be improved. When you wake up and speak this line, you are grounding yourself before you move. You are saying, I will not distort reality to protect my ego. I will not exaggerate it to dramatize my struggle. I will see it plainly. And then I will act. Clarity precedes power. When you stop arguing with what is, you free mental energy for what can be done. When you accept the present fully, you remove friction from your thinking. And with friction removed, movement becomes efficient. Acceptance gives you stability. Action gives you direction. Together, they create progress. You cannot shape what you refuse to see. You cannot influence what you deny. But when you accept reality, fully, calmly, honestly, you gain the only position from which transformation is possible. And from that position, you build. Line 20. I am unbreakable. Every storm only roots me deeper in my purpose. Storms do not ask for permission. They arrive suddenly, sometimes loudly, sometimes quietly. They disrupt plans, they shake certainty, they test stability. And in those moments, it is easy to believe that you are being broken. But there is a difference between being shaken and being shattered. A tree with shallow roots fears the storm. A tree with deep roots uses it. The wind forces it to grip the earth more firmly. The pressure strengthens its foundation. Purpose works the same way. When your direction is unclear, adversity feels like destruction. When your purpose is defined, adversity becomes reinforcement. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." Purpose absorbs impact. It contextualizes pain. It prevents temporary hardship from rewriting your identity. To say, I am unbreakable, is not to claim that you do not feel pain. It is not denial. It is structure. You may bend, you may struggle, you may even doubt, but you do not fragment. You do not abandon your direction because of discomfort. Storms reveal alignment. If your path depends on comfort, difficulty will derail you. If your path depends on validation, criticism will destabilize you. But if your path is anchored in purpose, resistance becomes confirmation that you are engaged in something meaningful. Marcus Aurelius faced war, betrayal, plague. Yet in his private reflections, he returned repeatedly to duty, to virtue, to the idea that his role was not to escape hardship, but to meet it with steadiness. He did not control the storm, he controlled his stance within it. There is a psychological strength that comes from anticipating turbulence. When you assume life should be smooth, every challenge feels unfair. When you assume storms are part of the terrain, you are less surprised when they arrive. Unbreakable does not mean invulnerable. It means integrated. It means your identity is not built on circumstances. It is built on commitment. Every storm tests that commitment. When you experience rejection and continue, roots deepen. When you experience failure and persist, roots deepen. When you experience loss and remain grounded in values, roots deepen. Over time, resilience compounds into solidity. The modern world often equates strength with aggression or dominance, but real strength is endurance. It is steadiness under pressure. It is remaining aligned when everything around you shifts. When you wake up and speak this line, you are preparing yourself internally. You are acknowledging that today may bring friction. It may bring unpredictability. It may bring discomfort. And you are deciding in advance that none of it will detach you from your purpose. Storms are temporary. Roots are structural. You do not measure your strength by the absence of difficulty. You measure it by your continuity through it. And when you refuse to let turbulence redefine you, you do not merely survive the storm. You emerge more grounded than before. Line 21. I trade comfort for growth and certainty for greatness. Comfort is subtle. It does not announce itself as limitation. It presents itself as safety, as stability, as relief. And for a while it feels justified. Stay where it's familiar. Choose what you already know. Avoid unnecessary risk. But comfort, when prolonged, quietly narrows possibility. Growth rarely happens in familiarity. It happens in tension, in uncertainty, in the space where outcomes are not guaranteed. The Stoics understood that a meaningful life requires voluntary discomfort. Seneca, who was born into privilege, deliberately practiced moments of austerity, wearing simple clothes, eating modest food, not to suffer, but to remind himself that comfort was not essential to strength. He asked himself, "Is this what I feared?" And often the answer was no. When you become overly attached to comfort, fear increases. You begin protecting what feels stable rather than pursuing what feels meaningful. You start making decisions based on avoiding discomfort instead of expanding capacity. Certainty is comforting. It reduces anxiety. It provides predictability. But certainty also limits innovation. Most great achievements were pursued without guarantees, without clarity, without assurance of success. Greatness demands exposure. Aristotle wrote, "We become brave by doing brave acts." Notice the sequence. Action precedes identity. You do not wait to feel courageous. You step into uncertainty, and courage forms through repetition. Trading certainty for greatness means accepting that you will not always know the outcome, that progress involves ambiguity, that ambition carries risk. The modern world encourages optimization of comfort, faster delivery, easier communication, minimal inconvenience. But the human spirit strengthens in challenge, not ease. When you avoid discomfort consistently, your threshold for stress lowers. Small challenges feel overwhelming. Minor obstacles feel threatening. But when you deliberately step into difficulty, your threshold expands. You become harder to destabilize. Think about the moments in your life that shaped you most. They were rarely the comfortable ones. They were the uncertain decisions, the bold steps, the risks that forced growth. Comfort preserves the present. Growth transforms it. When you wake up and speak this line, you are preparing yourself for moments of choice. The easier option will appear. The familiar path will call. The safe decision will tempt. And you will remember that safety is not the same as fulfillment. Certainty keeps you where you are. Greatness asks you to move without guarantees. This does not mean reckless risk. It means intentional expansion. It means choosing the harder conversation, the disciplined routine, the ambitious goal that stretches you. Discomfort is temporary. Expansion is lasting. Every time you choose growth over ease, you redefine your limits. Every time you step into uncertainty, you enlarge your capacity. Comfort whispers, stay. Greatness whispers, move. And the direction you choose determines the life you build. Line 22. My inner peace is my highest priority and my greatest source of power. In a world that constantly measures success through visibility, speed, and external achievement, inner peace can seem secondary, almost passive, almost indulgent. But in reality, inner peace is not weakness. It is strength under control. When your inner state is unstable, everything feels heavier. Decisions become reactive. Small problems escalate. Focus fractures. But when there is calm within, clarity sharpens. You see situations as they are, not as your emotions distort them. The Stoics valued tranquility not as escape, but as foundation. Seneca wrote, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." That kind of steadiness is not accidental, it is cultivated. Inner peace does not mean the absence of ambition. It means the absence of chaos. There is a difference. You can pursue excellence without being internally frantic. You can work intensely without being emotionally turbulent. You can move fast without being mentally scattered. Many people sacrifice peace in pursuit of progress, believing agitation equals productivity. But agitation drains energy. It clouds judgment. It shortens patience. Peace conserves power. Marcus Aurelius often returned to stillness in his reflections. Even as emperor during war and plague, he sought internal order. He knew external conditions could not always be controlled, but internal alignment could be protected. Inner peace is not granted by circumstances. It is maintained by perspective. It requires boundaries. It requires emotional discipline. It requires letting go of trivial conflicts. And perhaps most importantly, it requires understanding that not every battle is worth entering. When your peace is a priority, you become selective. You choose which thoughts to entertain, which conversations to engage, which conflicts deserve response. Peace does not mean you avoid confrontation. It means you confront without losing yourself. The philosopher Lao Tzu wrote, "If you are at peace, you live in the present." Presence is power. When your mind is not racing ahead in anxiety or stuck behind in regret, you respond more effectively. Inner peace strengthens perception. It allows you to see opportunity where others see panic. It allows you to stay steady when others escalate. It becomes an advantage, subtle but decisive. When you wake up and speak this line, you are not promising a stress-free day. You are committing to internal steadiness regardless of what arises. There will be urgency. There will be pressure. There may be disagreement. But your peace is not negotiable. Because when your inner state is stable, your actions are deliberate. Your words are measured. Your decisions are thoughtful. Peace is not passive. It is controlled energy. And controlled energy, directed with intention, becomes influence. Your greatest power is not intensity. It is composure. And composure begins within. Line 23. I inhale absolute strength and exhale everything that no longer serves me. Breathing is the most constant rhythm of your life. You rarely notice it. It happens in the background, steady and automatic. But within that simple act lies something powerful: renewal. Every inhale is intake. Every exhale is release. And yet, psychologically, many people inhale constantly and rarely exhale. They accumulate stress. They collect resentment. They store regret. They hold on to past conversations, old failures, outdated identities. Over time, this accumulation becomes weight. You cannot move freely while carrying everything. The Stoics practiced a form of mental release long before modern psychology gave it language. Marcus Aurelius regularly reminded himself to let go of what was outside his control. He wrote, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." That sentence captures the rhythm of breathing. Take in what strengthens you, release what burdens you. Strength is not only about accumulation, it is about filtration. When you inhale strength, you choose what enters your internal space. You absorb discipline. You absorb clarity. You absorb courage. You remind yourself that you are capable of more than your impulses suggest. But the second half matters just as much. To exhale what no longer serves you is an act of intentional detachment. Old grudges do not strengthen you. Lingering shame does not sharpen you. Persistent self-doubt does not empower you. They occupy space. They distort perception. They drain energy. Letting go does not mean forgetting lessons. It means releasing emotional residue. Epictetus taught that suffering often arises from attachment. Attachment to how things should have been, to how others should behave, to how outcomes should unfold. When attachment loosens, clarity increases. Imagine carrying a backpack filled with unnecessary weight. Each step becomes heavier, but the moment you remove what is not essential, movement becomes fluid again. Breathing offers a simple metaphor for life. You cannot inhale forever. You cannot accumulate endlessly. There must be balance. Strength in, burden out. When you wake up and speak this line, you are resetting internally. You are deciding that today is not contaminated by yesterday's frustration, that old narratives do not automatically replay, that outdated fears are not invited into the present. This is not denial, it is curation. You are curating your internal environment deliberately. You inhale strength, discipline, focus, calm. You exhale resentment, comparison, regret, hesitation. And in that rhythm, something stabilizes. Modern life often encourages accumulation, more information, more opinions, more comparison, more urgency. But power comes not from volume, it comes from clarity. Clarity requires release. Each breath becomes symbolic. A reminder that you are not required to carry everything forward, that you can begin again, not once a year, not once a month, but in every moment. You are not defined by what you let go of. You are strengthened by it. And when you consciously release what weakens you, you create space for what elevates you. Strength is not only what you hold, it is also what you choose to release. Line 24. Silence is where my clarity is born, and my next moves are refined. Silence is uncomfortable for many people. The moment noise fades, something else surfaces. Thoughts, unresolved questions, uncertainty. So they fill the space. With music, with conversation, with scrolling, with constant stimulation. But clarity does not emerge in noise. It emerges in stillness. Blaise Pascal once observed that much of humanity's restlessness comes from the inability to sit quietly alone in a room. Silence confronts you with yourself, and for that reason it is often avoided. But silence is not emptiness, it is filtration. In silence, you begin to notice the difference between impulse and intention, between reaction and reflection. When external noise diminishes, internal patterns become visible. you start to see what truly matters and what is merely distraction. The Stoics valued solitude not as escape, but as recalibration. Marcus Aurelius wrote that one can retreat into oneself at any moment. That internal retreat was not withdrawal from responsibility. It was preparation for it. When you are constantly stimulated, your thinking becomes reactive. You move from input to input, from demand to demand. Decisions become hurried. Perspective narrows. Silence widens. Perspective. It slows the mind just enough to observe without urgency. It allows questions to deepen rather than be answered prematurely. Clarity requires distance from noise. Think about the most important decisions in your life. Rarely were they made in chaos. They were formed after reflection, after stepping back, after allowing space for discernment. In silence, motives become clearer. You begin to recognize whether a decision is driven by fear, ego, pressure, or genuine alignment. That distinction is subtle, and it can only be detected in stillness. The philosopher Lao Tzu wrote, "Silence is a source of great strength. That strength is not loud. It is steady. It prevents impulsive moves. It refines strategy. Your next move should not be reactive. It should be deliberate. And deliberation requires quiet. Modern life rarely provides it automatically. Notifications interrupt thought. Conversations overlap. Information floods attention. If you do not protect silence intentionally, it disappears. But when you claim even a few moments each day for quiet reflection, something stabilizes. You see patterns, you correct direction, you refine intention. Silence becomes your internal workshop, the place where ideas are sharpened and distractions are discarded. When you wake up and speak this line, you're reminding yourself that clarity is not found in constant motion. It is found in pause. That your best decisions are not rushed, they are refined. Noise demands reaction. Silence invites precision, and precision determines trajectory. You do not need to escape the world to find clarity. You need moments of quiet within it, because in silence you hear the voice that actually matters. Not the loudest one, not the fastest one, but the most aligned one. And from that place, your next move becomes intentional. Line 25. I am fully present, fully capable, and fully prepared for anything. There is a quiet power in presence, not the kind of presence that demands attention, but the kind that anchors you completely in this moment. Many people live divided, part of them replaying yesterday, another part rehearsing tomorrow. Regret pulls backward, anxiety pulls forward, and the present moment, the only place where life actually happens, is neglected. But power only exists here. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Confine yourself to the present, not because the past is irrelevant or the future unimportant, but because action only happens now. Preparation happens now. Strength is expressed now. When you are fully present, distraction loses influence, comparison fades, hypothetical fears shrink. You see what is in front of you clearly, without distortion. Presence sharpens capability. And capability is often underestimated. Many people doubt themselves not because they lack ability, but because they lack focus. Their attention is fragmented, their energy scattered. When attention is reclaimed, competence becomes visible. To say you are fully capable is not arrogance, it is alignment. It is the recognition that you have survived every previous challenge, that you have adapted before, learned before, endured before. The evidence is in your history. Epictetus taught that you are not disturbed by events, but by your judgments about them. When you remove catastrophic judgment, What remains is a situation and a response. Most situations are manageable when approached calmly. Prepared does not mean predicting every outcome. It means trusting your adaptability. You cannot anticipate every variable. You cannot control every factor, but you can rely on your ability to respond. Preparedness is internal, not external. When you wake up and speak this final line, you are integrating everything that came before it: the discipline, the resilience, the focus, the clarity, the boundaries, the strength, the peace. All of it converges here. Fully present, not distracted by noise. Fully capable, not diminished by doubt. Fully prepared, not paralyzed by uncertainty. Life does not wait for perfect readiness. It unfolds continuously, and those who move through it effectively are not those who eliminate unpredictability, but those who remain steady within it. There will be unexpected conversations, sudden changes, moments that test patience, opportunities that require courage, and in each of those moments, what matters is not perfection, it is presence. When you are here, truly here, you respond rather than react. You act rather than hesitate. You observe before judging. This final declaration is not about invincibility. It is about readiness. You are not waiting for the right conditions. You are not postponing action until fear disappears. You are not delaying growth until certainty arrives. You are here, capable, prepared, and when you carry that posture into the day, something subtle shifts. Challenges feel lighter, decisions feel clearer, movement feels intentional. Because you are no longer divided, you are aligned. And alignment is strength. And now, as we come to the end of these 25 declarations, remember this: they are not just words, they are alignment. They are a daily calibration of who you choose to be. The way you begin your morning shapes the architecture of your day. Before the noise, before the demands, before the world starts pulling at your attention, those first few minutes belong to you, so make them intentional. Wake up, stand still, take a slow breath, and speak these lines, not mechanically, not hurriedly, but deliberately. Let each declaration land. Let it settle. Let it remind you of the posture you are choosing before anything tests it. You are not repeating affirmations for comfort. You are reinforcing identity. 5 minutes each morning. That is all it takes. 5 minutes to reset your focus, your boundaries, your discipline, your resilience. 5 minutes to choose strength before distraction chooses for you. Over time, something subtle will shift. Your reactions will become responses. Your hesitation will become movement. Your chaos will become clarity, not because the world changed, but because you did. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs that reset, someone who needs to remember who they are becoming. And if you found value here, take a moment to like the episode and subscribe. Not for algorithms, but to stay connected to this kind of deliberate conversation. Thank you for listening. Thank you for investing in your own growth. And tomorrow morning, when you wake up, begin again. Steady, focused, and fully prepared. I'll see you in the next one.